Elemental Limbs. I'm your chaotic host, Viking, and today I will be reading 3 of my horror stories. So grab your popcorn, turn down the lights, and enjoy the show. Story number 1 for today. My cat, the Skinwalker. I did it. I finally went out and adopted a cat to help me with my depression. This little guy is just over a year old, has yellow eyes, black and white fur. He kind of looks like he's wearing a tuxedo and 4 mixed match socks. I remember when my mother was my age, she had a cow kitty named Doobie, so I decided to change the spelling a little and name my cat Doobie with an IE. I stopped at the store and bought everything I needed for a cat: food, water bowls, litter, a litter box, a collar, and a box of treats and a bunch of toys. I even stopped at the machine that engraves dog tags and made a tag for him with his name and my phone number. I picked up a few groceries to make dinner tonight, and then I took Doobie home. Once I got home, I set everything up, put the tag on the collar, and put the collar on Doobie. He was still and didn't fuss when I put the collar on him. He must have had previous owners who trained him and had to surrender him, I thought to myself. I scratched behind his ear and called him a good boy, then spent the rest of the day playing with him and attempted to train him with the treats. Evening came. I took my medication at 9 as instructed and went to bed. I let Doobie stay up and explore the house, but left the door open for him so he could come into my bedroom if he wanted to. I filled my glass with water and set it on the nightstand as I crawled into bed, drifting off after about 10 minutes. A loud crash came from the kitchen at around 3 a.m. I rubbed my face softly and groaned, "Doobie!" I yelled, "3 a.m. zoomies are not cool, buddy!" I grumbled and stood to my feet, headed out and into the kitchen. As I looked into the kitchen, I didn't see my cat. The adorable little fur ball I brought home now stood over 7 foot tall. It stood in its long, disfigured hind legs, and its arms were almost as long as its whole body. There were chunks of black and white fur stuck in its wrinkly gray leather skin. I froze in fear as it turned around, moving in impossible ways. It stared at me with black, hollow eyes. It didn't have a mouth, but I could hear it speak to me in my mind. "You shall not be harmed by me, human." The words echoed and itched in my mind, making it feel like spiders were crawling all over and eating into my brain. A loud ringing and millions of tiny footsteps flooded my mind as the screams started deafening me. I covered my ears and screamed in horror, falling onto my ass as I backed into the wall, staring at the creature in horror and disbelief. As my body started itching and burning, it slowly split its skin where the mouth should be and gave me a haunting, horrific grin. Its teeth were like railway spikes. Voices and scream filled my head as I felt the agony and insanity of the creature's past victims. I couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't hear or feel anymore. I let out a loud, blood-curdling scream as I felt the insanity taking over. I writhed in agony. I broke a glass picture frame and shoved a piece of glass into my eye. The last thing I remembered was feeling the blood running down my face and seeing the creature walk up to me. I'm not sure where I am right now, but I know I am dead now. Everything is gray and foggy. No beautiful trees and lakes, no feasts, no brimstone. I'm neither in Valhalla nor Hell. I'm stuck somewhere in the middle, and I'm all alone here. Story number 2 for the day. Dad-Taur. It's quite confusing to me how things got to this point, or even what really happened. The creature before me wasn't my father. This is some abomination that developed in the shadow of my dad's lies. And for some reason, it's after me. My life has been pretty hectic for the last, my entire life, really. Both of my parents have been fighting with each other for as long as I can remember. They first mentioned divorce when I was about 5 or 6. I guess they tried to stay together for me and my siblings for a while, because they didn't mention it again until I was 10. But this time, they stuck with it. I used to look up to my father. I had many problems with my mother when I was younger. We always fought. She seemed angry all the time. We used to disagree about almost everything, but one thing I always remembered was that she was extremely hesitant to speak ill of my father. and always told us she wants us to be able to have a normal relationship with him. The same cannot be said about, quote, Dad. My entire life, all I heard from him was how much he disliked her. He would call her a witch and convince us she was trying to make us hate him. I know that narcissists like him project their bullshit on everyone else, but I was so young then, and he always played the hero dad, so I believed him for so long. I actually hated my mother because of the things he had said. When I had gotten to a point that I thought I couldn't take her bullshit anymore, I packed up my stuff and moved out of her house with my fiance at the time, now wife of 3 years. She and I moved back to Arkansas, and I didn't speak to my mother for over a year. It was torture, to put it nicely. I missed her and my siblings more than I could bear, and I knew they missed me too. Finally, I ended up unblocking her and started rekindling our relationship. And she isn't the same woman that I've been spoon-fed to hate. She understands and accepts me. We agree on nearly everything now, and she supports me through everything I wanted to do. From doing drag to transitioning into a man, and to this day, she still hesitates to speak ill of my father. I will never understand why Dad couldn't just do the same. Something about talking to her again made him flip a switch, made him so angry that this amalgamation of chaos was born from him and took over. He and I started fighting all the time, him constantly saying that my mother drove a wedge between him and I, and he was always very nasty about it. Every time we talked, we fought, and each time it got angrier and nastier. It got to a point where we were screaming and cussing at each other. This man even threatened to slap me if he saw me again. I told him if he ever threatens me with that shit again, I'd knock his ass out. Obviously, those words went in one ear and out of the other, for he continued to threaten me with violence, accusing me of manipulating my sister, and ended things by telling me I am not his fucking kid. I haven't spoke to Joe since then, and I will never call him Dad again. I can never trust him like that. It's been a few weeks since the last time I ever spoke to him. Tonight, I was woken up by a loud shattering coming from my room. I snapped awake and jumped up in a panic, grabbing my Ruger off the table because I immediately thought I was being robbed. What actually happened was much, much worse than a simple home invasion. I looked up to see this horrifying monster that had just barreled through my window. It was a horrid, fleshy blob of disfigured limbs. It had 4 arms coming out of the side like they were 4 feet. Its lower body was just a mush of flesh. Its upper body was bulky, fleshy, and had rotting flesh falling off of it. It had teeth coming out of its chest and torso. There were 2 stumps where arms should be, but no limbs, just fleshy stumps. Large bones and more teeth came out of its back and made a trail up the back of its molten-looking neck. The creature's mouth was stuck gaping open to an impossible degree and had 3 spindly, fleshy tentacles coming out of its mouth. It looked like a fucking centaur from Fallout 3. Only this thing had my dad's face on it. I recognized that buzz red hair, the sea blue eyes, and that pin-up girl tattoo he had, now molten and disfigured in the creature. Panic struck me hard as I bolted out of my bedroom. The dad flesh monster thing chasing me. It waddled its fleshy body at an impossible speed, spitting this acidic goo at me. I ran downstairs and turned around, firing a shot from my Ruger into his head. But that only seemed to anger the creature more. It started moving much faster as it lunged its body down the stairs. I tried to run away, but it was much faster than I am now. I ran for the door, but before I could cross the threshold, it grabbed my leg with one of its tongue tentacles and knocked me onto the ground. I tried desperately to break free, shooting the tentacle until I ran out of bullets, but none of them left so much as a scratch on it. The creature slowly wrapped the other 2 around my body and slumped its heavy, rotting body on top of me. I tried to scream for help, but before I could get so much as a squeak out, the creature unhinged its jaw even further and started projectile vomiting its acid into my mouth. As the acid traveled down my throat and ate away at the muscle and flesh, leaving my bottom lip down to my collarbone with nothing but a splotched, bleached skeleton, I can hear every bad thing my father has ever said to me in my mind, reminding me of his hatred for me. The last thing that went through my mind was a simple question. What man lets himself turn into this and hurt their child like this? How could he justify turning into a monster and killing their child, body and mind? I can hear him laughing at me as I slumped over, dying without even taking a last breath. How fucking could he? A true story, written fictionally to express how I feel on a real situation. Final story of the evening, Vampire Hunt. Part 2, to Drag Show Bloodfest. Oedipus and Dolly were running around frantically, trying desperately to lose the angry crowd of people chasing them. The townsmen found out about their mass feeding at the club that one night, and have been trying to hunt the group in order to take them down for good. Oedipus and Dolly have been able to keep themselves safe thus far, but the number in the mob was just too great for them. "This way!" Oedipus hollered to Dolly as the couple ran down into the underground sewer systems. The tunnels weren't too dirty, and there were platforms for them to rock and run on. Dolly and Oedipus took a sharp right turn and ran further into the sewer system. Dolly kept a mental map of everywhere they've been and ran in many different directions to throw off the angry mob. Their hearts were pounding with fear and excitement. At the entrance to the sewers, the mob stood for a moment. There were maybe 25 people, including the ringleader, a red-haired man named Joe. Joe held a torch and a hatchet in his hands, taking the idea of a vampire hunt way too seriously. "What do we do, boss?" one of the mob goons asked. He had short brown hair, brown eyes, and a scar over his left cheek. He carried 2 knives. "What's our game plan?" Joe smiled and shined the torch into the tunnel, seeing the ledges on the sides. "We go follow them. These sewers can't be that big for a small town." The goons all agreed cheerfully as the group of humans made their way inside. Joe leads the group to find the king and queen of Hell, as they call them. Joe and his goons were very intolerant people to many things besides the idea of vampires. Had this nefarious group been human and truly had a normal drag show, Joe still would have done this. Had they not performed at all but simply wore a rainbow, he still would have attacked them, and the rest of the mob were the exact same way. The group had spent half an hour down in the sewers, searching and cursing every dead end. 2 of the goons in the back stopped to look at a strange sight. There was one singular wet footprint, no second one, no trail. "The hell?" one of them asked, looking at it. "The hell if I..." Before he could finish the sentence, he and the other goon who stopped to look were suddenly snatched up by an unseen, powerful force. They were both held up against the wall from each other. Before either of them could make a peep, their throats were sliced open. Their bodies dropped lifelessly to the floor. Joe had heard the bodies dropped and looked behind him, his face twisting in horror as he saw 2 of his followers with thick, cleanly cut gashes on their throat as blood oozed and soaked the ground and the water around them. "Search the area!" he shouted as the group started to disperse and search around. Many of them staying in the immediate area, but a few groups wandered a bit further into the surrounding areas. That's when all the screaming started. Each group that wandered further were all now screaming bloody murder as the sounds of blood spilling filled the air. Joe and the ones close by all tried to go rescue their party members, but each group they came across were all lifeless on the floor in the same fashion. The other 2 did, with the same kind of wounds. One group split off to find the others, and they were the last group to be attacked. There were only 7 people left with Joe after this last group split. Joe heard the last group screaming and went to go save them with the 7 remaining members, but they were too late. This group is now part of the body count, only this group had different injuries. Diamond or triangle-shaped gashes in their frontal lobe, as if a spear was driven into their forehead. "What the hell is happening?" Joe yelled out. Then in the midst of anger and fear, found a door that led into a random room in the sewers. An evil grin creeped across the leprechaun man's face as he walked up and pushed the door open. Dolly and Oedipus were crouched in the corner, holding each other as a sense of fear filled their eyes. "Any last words before we send you abominations back to where you came from?" he asked them. Before the couple could say anything, or Joe could do anything, 5 of the remaining party members were suddenly grabbed and dragged away. Joe looked back to see his party being attacked by the other vampires from the club. Adam Silver came at the one he took from behind, smacking the man in the back of the head and knocking him onto his ass. The goon tried to swing at him with his two knives, barely nicking one of Adam's legs, as the silver fox drove his spear into the man's forehead, haymaker style, yelling out his battle cry. Dolly stood up and rushed one of the two women that weren't dragged away. She let out an ear-piercing wail as she started ripping the woman apart and tearing into her chest like a starving, rabid dog. The woman struggled to pull the Queen of Darkness off of her, but Dolly kept slashing and wailing. Eventually the woman bleeds out and dies. Dolly licks up some of the blood and drinks as much as she can before it spoils. Zapster grabbed one of the party members by the hair and forcefully tugs his hair back, ramming his dagger through the man's trachea, giggling evilly. The man looked up at the suit-dressed man with immense pain and fear in his eyes. As he stares at Zapster, he gasps desperately. Zapster bursts into laughter as he watches the man slowly slump over and go limp. Salem and Pagan tag-teamed the two men they grabbed. The girls had the two victims spinning in circles as they took turns smacking them, punching them, or clawing at them. When the pair fell into the ground in agony, Salem and Pagan both raised one foot into the air and drove the heel of their shoes directly into the victims' foreheads. The heels go all the way through them and they die instantly. One of the remaining goons come up to defend her boss, but Oedipus lunges toward the goon, grabbing her by the neck and pinning her against the wall. The goon screams and cries out for help, but Oedipus punches through the goon. His hand goes completely through the woman's stomach, causing her entrails spill out into the floor as he moves his hand away. Oedipus drops the lifeless woman and growls angrily. Avi Gold exchanges a few punches with the woman they stole. The woman attempts to cut Avi with her knife as Avi starts wailing and unleashing everything she had built up in her. As the two fought and the woman became tired, Avi wanted to do her signature split move. However, her heel had a blade made into it. As Avi raised her leg and did the splits, the heel of her shoe cut the woman all the way from head to toe, cutting the woman completely in half vertically. As Joe looks around in horror and sees the rest of his friends dead, being fed on by the creatures of the night, he realizes he is now outnumbered and begins to panic as his friends are being feasted on. He looks for a way out before spotting Nairo. Joe's stomach turns and knots, and his mentality broke as he said shakily, "Son?" Nairo grins a toothy, sinister grin before walking up to the man. He digs his claws into Joe's throat and rips out his trachea completely. Joe fell lifelessly onto the ground as Nairo laughed, stating, "You never had the right to call yourself my dad. Fucking swine." Well, it's going to be all for this evening. Make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you guys in the next video.